Welcome to the Classical Happy Hour. I'm your host, Martin Davids. This is the show where my guests and I talk about music while enjoying a tasty beverage. Then we try to play some music together. Today's guest is Renée Gauthier. Hi, Renée.
Hey, Martin. So great to see you.
You too. I feel like I haven't run into you in a while.
I know. Thanks for asking me to do this. Great opportunity to see each other.
Totally. So for my listeners that don't know you, like what kind of stuff are you doing for work these days?
A lot of stuff. I'm still an active performer. So I'm a violinist, and I play with a lot of ensembles around here in Chicago with lyric opera, with Joffrey Ballet, with the CSO from time to time, which is really fun. And also, I'm a life and performance coach for musicians. So that keeps me very busy. I have a podcast. I have clients all over the world. And I write some content and create some trainings and just have a lot of fun with that.
Cool. You're the first podcaster I've had on my podcast.
I was just commenting on your wonderful mics. I think I'm ready for an upgrade in my studio.
Cool. So tell me a little about your education. Where'd you go to school?
When I went to school, I started at the Conservatoire in Quebec. There's a wonderful network of conservatories there that offer music education. At the time, it was free. Now I think it's inexpensive. And then from there, I went to University of Montreal for undergrad. And then I did what classical musicians do, right? You just get one degree after the next. So I went to Eastman for my master's. I did 2 years with the Emerson Quartet at the Hart School. And then I worked for a while and then finished everything with a terminal degree at Northwestern.
So you're a doctor?
Yes.
Not that kind of doctor, then?
Not that kind of doctor. I've got the paycheck to prove it.
Well, at least you don't have to get any more degrees now.
Well, they do call it terminal, so I think it's like a life sentence now.
That's what I've heard, yeah. My house, it's Doctor and Mr. that live here.
There you go.
So, are your family musicians?
Yeah, both my parents are. And funnily enough, my mom was the pianist, and she's the one who made me practice. And not surprisingly, I have a sister who's also a violinist here in the area in Chicago. And I can say that music was always part of our lives. Yeah.
Cool. What about your dad?
My dad was just always loved playing music. So he started violin quite late. And then he became a music teacher. And his passion for violin then switched to more fiddler type. So when I was a kid, he taught me some fiddling tunes. We played together. And then my mom was a school teacher, but her passion was music. So she started a nonprofit school in my hometown, which became one of the biggest actually in the province of Quebec when she was in charge. It had like 1,200 students. And it was how do you say in English? Not for profit. So very inexpensive. And it had, all sorts of lessons and programs. I think the closest thing I've seen to it here in the area would be the Merit School that provides education for low cost, but still high quality. So
just to be clear, she didn't have personally 1,200 students?
No, they had
that sounds like a lot.
They had about 46 private teachers, and they had a string orchestra and recorder ensemble and guitar ensemble and a Broadway troupe, like all of that. And it was a really great place. And I pretty much grew up there.
Is it still going?
It is, yeah. So someone else is in charge now because my mother is now very fully retired. But it was such a beautiful place, and I just grew up in the waiting room there. My mom would take me to work with her, and I would speak with everyone there. And of course, I started lessons there when I was a kid. So I was raised under her desk at the School of Music.
Your dad played violin, but he wasn't your teacher, was he?
No. I started with a teacher at that school.
It's always better.
Yes. I remember practicing with him, and he would say, okay, you can take a break. take 45 seconds.
45 seconds.
So
okay, it's over.
I didn't like practicing with him that much.
45 seconds. Wow. Why even stop?
Right? Yeah. I think that was the point. So no, I practice with my mom.
So, did you want to be a musician when you were growing up?
That's a very interesting question. And I've been pondering on that a lot lately. And I think that, yes. I think I've been thinking a lot about this because I have young children now. And my son is 13, my daughter is at 11. So we're at the age where it's like those type of reflections are being made and you don't want to influence too much. So that makes me reflect on my own decisions around that time. And I think for me, I loved the universe that I was in. I mean, I love playing the violin. I don't even like performing. You know, like the goal for me is not to step on stage. I like to actually hold the violin in my hand, make the sound. I like to feel the fingerboard. I know it sounds silly perhaps, but I loved being at the School of Music and then subsequently Conservatoire. I loved youth orchestra. I loved the friends that I had there. I loved playing chamber music. I mean, one of the first quartet I played was the Seven Last Words of Christ. So, you know, why start easy? And I just remember being so in love with that piece. And so I think that it wasn't so much as wanting to play the violin as a career as much as just
Wanting to play it?
Wanting to play it and live that life and being with those people doing those things. Yeah.
Were there any other parts of your life that drew you in like that?
No, I think like everything revolved around music.
Yeah, I mean, your
So did I even have a choice?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. So you weren't thinking, oh, I want to be an astronaut or...
No, okay. So one thing, at some point I was considering maybe being a journalist. And I had sort of a full circle moment a few years ago when I went to the fish-off competition. And I was doing a series of special episodes for the competition. I was on site. And I remember at some point I was interviewing someone, a little bit like what you and me are doing right now, and interviewing them for the podcast. And as I was standing there, I thought, wow, this is like journalism. I find it very interesting how now I have this podcast and I'm doing work that maybe reminds me a little bit of what my ideas of journalism were when I was a kid, which is you have ideas, you research them, you create some content, you write a blog post, or now, you release a podcast episode. So I think journalism was something I was attracted to, and somehow it has made its way in my life, which is kind of funny.
Cool. Yeah, I never thought of this as journalism. Just thought of it as getting together with a friend and have a drink and play some music. And just, learning things about people I've known for a long time that I don't ask in casual conversation,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So tell me about your podcast.
Mm-hmm. It's called the Mind Over Finger podcast. And it started out of, I'm a huge nerd. And I love having one-on-one conversation with people and asking questions and knowing more. And also I'm a huge podcast listener. So I listen to podcasts all the time. Anyone who lives in the big city knows there's a lot of time in the car to listen to all sorts of stuff. And I remember listening to a podcast where there was a musician being interviewed, and the line of questioning was not quite what I would have been going with. And I remember thinking, wow, there's so many questions I have for this person. And at the same time, I was teaching, and I would have these conversations with colleagues and with friends, and always think, oh, if this student could hear what we're talking about now, that was just what we were talking in his or her lesson yesterday. So at some point, I don't know, this idea popped in my head that maybe, why don't I start recording these conversations and put it out there in a podcast format. A friend of mine had just started a podcast, which made me realize that normal human beings can, do that. It's not just chosen fews, and it's all about really, I think the goal is to provide to, young musicians, or why not, people our age or maybe struggling with some issues, with some desires, content that they can turn to either deepen their practice or also deal with issues, like lack of confidence, things like this. Now I'm also certified as a life coach. All of this work brought me towards life coaching, because as I started training, and I have some programs on practicing and preparing for performance, we all know that, it's a human being on stage who's performing. And throughout the entire preparation process, you don't stop being a human. And throughout the entire performance process, you're also a human. So all of the issues of, feeling less than, feeling stressed out, not wanting to practice, getting super frustrated during practice, those are all human problems. So that's kind of, I marry all of this on the podcast. So practicing approaches, performance preparation, but also at the deeper level, like what are the issues that we deal with as human, and like what are the struggles. And I'll tell you, some of my students are amateurs, and some of my clients, my clients are amateurs, and some of my clients are world-class soloists. It's the same issues. They're human issues. So it's been really, 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 really fun.
Yeah, I was just teaching a lesson today, and the person I was teaching is also a teacher, but she's learning Baroque violin with me. So she was talking about how in the first 10 minutes of the lesson, she's just really nervous playing for me.
Mm-hmm.
And that doesn't really happen to her normally, because she doesn't have situations like that anymore where that happens.
Yeah.
So now she's learning to deal with it, and it's making her more able to help her students that also have the same issue.
Yeah. Isn't that funny? It really comes full circle. Yeah.
So mind over finger, like does that mean you concentrate on the mind over technique, or like what were you thinking when you came up with the name?
I think I was thinking about, many, many things. There's always so many elements that come into play, but I studied with Zvi Zeitlin at Eastman. I don't know if you know. He was really old at the time I started studying with him, and he would always say in this kind of like tough voice, I can't, imitate him really well, but he would be like, technique is conception, and always talk about technique being conception. And he was really big on understanding exactly what you're doing, not just playing through stuff mindlessly, but always understanding. And that was something that was really big also with my first teacher. But you know how it is, sometimes you come with another person and everything starts to kind of gel together. And the more I taught, the more I realized that, when students are having issues, a lot of time it's because they're not thinking. They're either doing things that they think they should do without putting I shouldn't say any, but putting a personal input into it, or they kind of just play over and over. There's no method a lot of time. So when you can start to give someone some tools to be mindful about it, to be present, how to practice, to have a process that works, but also the right mindset, because I have found that you need presence. You need what I call the beginner's mind, this approach of curiosity, of attention to fundamentals, of humility also in the face of the things that you're trying to learn. And then one of the biggest ones is the absolute self-compassion. And not in the sense that, oh, this is out of tune, it's okay. It's not what I'm talking about here. But I'm talking, okay, so if it's out of tune, you don't have to hate yourself through the process of fixing it. So, okay, how do you talk to yourself in the way that is really effective in the practice room, that you're going to do some really great work, right? Because I mean, I don't know about you, but if there is someone yelling at me, or if you're in a rehearsal and you get I call it the furry eyebrow from the conductor, I don't do my best playing, right? So when you feel supported, this is when you can kind of breathe and do great work. So we have to be that to ourselves in the practice room. So with the right mindset and the right methods, then the work can be so much more effective. So I was seeing a lot of my students not having those things. And I thought, I really need to figure out a way to provide them with that information. So that started with the podcast, and then subsequently turned into some programs and coaching. I told you I was a nerd.
No, that's great. I mean, I don't remember really being taught how to practice, or even being told this is what your mindset should be when you practice. And it probably would have helped a lot.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, I think for me, going back to my mom, there was a lot of methods and process there in the practice room when I was 8, 9. The approach was very mindful. My teacher at the time was a really amazing guy with a lot of wonderful ideas on how, you need to live life. You need to appreciate the food and literature and all of the arts. And he was a really, really deep person. So that, I think that came into play as well. But yeah, I think a lot of time we're just going through the motion. And then sometimes we end up with teachers who are not very kind. And there's this, not just in music, it's in sport, it's everywhere. It's people who work in an office will have that type of boss. You see it everywhere. But I really hope that we can change things in music education where what I call the dictator teacher is a thing of the past. So high standards, yes, we need it, right? But with a different approach.
Yeah, I always viewed the relationship as kind of parental a little bit. There's some aspect of it that feels like you're trying to please your parent or something.
Yeah, yeah.
And I never examined whether that was good or bad. I think it could go either way.
Yeah.
Not every parent is a good parent.
Yeah. And that's what's interesting too with education. I look at the way I was teaching, maybe even just 10 years ago, I was modeling things that I had experience with teachers. And now 10 years later, I would not do these things. I wouldn't use this language. My ideas about them has changed. And I think that's the beauty of, kind of being a nerd and reading and taking things deeper and just going on this journey.
I mean, there's so much depth to music and all the other arts. I feel like it's almost weekly that I think, oh my God, now I understand some new thing.
Yeah. Oh, I hear you. Same here.
And I've been playing for so long. And it just doesn't stop. Well, I guess I guess I still have that beginner's curious mindset,
Yeah, that's a gift.
I mean, I don't know why you'd want to keep doing it otherwise if you just already knew everything. Yeah. And some people, are really able to keep that going. And I think these are the people that, they're 70, 80, 90 going around and still inspiring us. That's the beauty. They're still curious. Yeah, even simple things like the word instrument. Like we're playing an instrument. It's just a tool for us to do something,
Yeah.
We don't have to be a slave to how we think it's supposed to be played or how we were taught to play it, or we can just figure out what kind of sounds we like that we can get out of it.
Yeah. I think that's a big thing for me. When the pandemic happened, I remember I was driving home, and I had just learned that the entire ring cycle had been canceled at Lyric, and I was super desperate and just not desperate, devastated, because I was looking forward to this for, like, this is your chance in your life to play at the ring cycle. I was so excited. Plus all of the hours of practicing, and I stopped at the gym. This was before everything was shut down. And as I was on the treadmill and I was thinking about it, at the time I already had started to build a little bit of a community online. And I thought, what can we do? What is there left? And then I realized, well, like, the music is still there. We're all still there. And the joy of making music is still there. Okay, so everything's shut down. At the time, I thought for a few weeks. I was like, what can we do? So I put together, almost like, I stepped off the treadmill and went home, and I did the Joyful Practice Challenge. And that was super fun. And I did it 3 years in a row. And I have a couple podcast episodes about that, about like how we can recapture the joy in practice. And like, for me, that was my lifeline during COVID, like, to stay connected with the joy of making music, which sometimes when we become professional, it's very easy to be completely separated from that initial joy that we had that got us to play music. And it's just so good to have such a vivid, reminder, to have that opportunity. So in many ways, COVID was good, for that particular instance. So to just really spend time thinking, what brings me joy when I practice? Even if I'm trying to fix a problem and I'm doing a technical work, what makes that fun? What makes it enjoyable? So for me, that's recapturing joy in practice and performing is I mean, I don't want to say it's my mission in life, but, almost, I think.
Yeah, I mean, being joyful in performance is the best. I mean, it's completely visible to the audience, and they will come up and tell you that how much they liked seeing you, because they could tell you were having a good time.
Yeah.
They don't want to see people hating it up there.
Yeah.
I mean, what could be worse? Yeah.
You gotta have that spark.
But yeah, during the pandemic, I prepared and then recorded the solo album, and I had to figure out how to practice for that, and without getting burnt out.
Yeah.
Or hating doing it. And I decided to try a new model for practicing, that based on like fighting, basically. Like how fighters, they don't walk around in the super best shape at all times because it's just too brutal on their bodies to train that hard.
Yes.
So when they have a fight coming up, they just do a camp, like a fight camp. And they have a certain number of weeks where they just amp it up, and then so that they're at a peak at the end of the camp. So I was like, why don't I do that? Mm-hmm. And then my peak will be my recording dates, So I just planned out everything, and I had like my weekly sheet for what I did each day. And it was great because some days I didn't play everything on the album every day.
Yeah.
So it might be like a day or two before I came back to something, and it was so nice to come back, because I wasn't allowed to touch that piece,
Yeah, I love that plan. That's a really good analogy with the fighting.
Yeah, I thought, why not? See if it works.
Yeah. See, that I love that. This is like totally beginner's mind. Let's try something. Let's see what happens. So that's the curiosity that makes so many awesome projects come to life, I think.
But it's also, the basis is a little bit like, if you just kill yourself every day, how long is that going to last,
Right. Not sustainable.
Is that the life you want?
Yeah.
I don't, you know, all you talk about your teacher that said you should read literature and see art, and there are lots of famous artists that talk about those things. You know, even like Heifetz is like, I can't imagine anything worse than just talking about music all the time. You know.
Yeah.
And I think we're human beings. Why would we not participate in all the human stuff? You know, if we want to be able to express human emotions, we should feel them ourselves.
Yeah. Yeah, and like I was saying, it's the human that steps on stage who's playing the instrument. So that human needs to have, as you said, like something to say. But also we have all these buckets that we need to fill. I didn't come up with this concept, but you know, like we need human connection, we need R&R, we need fulfillment, we need, you know, yes, food, and you know, and when we're able to experience what I would call kind of like the life's full spectrum, then I think everything gets better. Our practicing, our performing, yeah.
So, if you didn't do what you do, what job would you like to do? Is there something totally unrelated?
Right now, I mean, coaching is what it is. If I couldn't play the violin, I would be a coach, and I don't think I would want to do anything anymore at this point. Now that I know of coaching,
Podcaster.
Yeah, podcaster and coach. That's it. Yeah.
Cool. So, what do you love about making music?
At this selfish level, like I told you, I just love holding a violin or a viola. I just bought a viola. I don't play the viola, but I love the viola. I should have been a violist, I think. So I bought a viola, and I just love playing it, producing sound. I don't know. There's something, you know, people who play an instrument, they know what I mean by, you know, we just love to play the dang thing, right? But I think for me also it's the like coming together with like-minded friends and playing some music together. In a professional setting, that's not always fun, but a lot of times it's fun.
Yeah, I always think when people start talking about meditating and stuff, I think, well, I could just practice, you know, just play a scale. I'm not thinking about anything, you know. You're just hearing that sound coming out, and like everything else is gone.
Yeah. Yeah. What's funny too is now that I don't have as much time as I used to. When I was a student, right, I just wanted to play my pieces, and now I would practice technique all day. I'm just curious. I just want to try, you know. I'd like to finish all the etude books, all the caprices, every scale book I could get my hand on, but there's just not that kind of time.
Now you've got me thinking about what it's going to feel like to touch the violin. And, you know, I remember I had a student that was shopping for a violin, and they got one that like was made like the week before.
Oh, wow.
And it just smelled really good. Like that fresh wood smell.
Oh, yeah.
It's like, yeah, it smells great.
Or it's like when
that won't last though.
Like when you see a beautiful violin, it's just, it's beautiful.
Sensual approach to practicing.
Yes.
Light some candles. Okay. Do you have any advice for young musicians? I know you dish it out on your podcast all the time, but you got to dish it out on mine now.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. So much. Let me see. The one that I think would maybe be helpful. I think as young musicians, we receive so much advice, and I think that it'd be helpful for anyone to try to implement the advice they receive harder and question it at the same time. So how can you take what someone says and really hear it and receive it and try it? And experiment with it, and not just try it absent-mindedly, but really experiment with it and see if you can go beyond the words that the teacher said. You know, let's say a specific hand position or a way to approach a shift, like things like this. Can you try like your hardest to implement what the teacher says, and at the same time see what that works, how that works for you? Like what does that look like for you? Sorry, I'm having a francophone moment here. So it's both this idea of pondering on everything and experimenting and taking in advice and never losing yourself in the process. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and trying to see if, don't just keep doing it if you don't get any result.
Yeah, because I've seen, and I'm sure you as well as a teacher, you've seen students that they don't quite try it. They don't, they try it a couple times and they say, oh, that didn't work. Because of course it felt unfamiliar at first. And because of the unfamiliarity, they assume it doesn't work. It doesn't work for me. But they didn't quite play with it enough. And by playing with it, I mean, like, just give it a few days, try to do it precisely the way it was presented to you, try to see if that works for you, keep working until it maybe gets familiar. And then at the same time, I see the opposite, where someone will try to do exactly what I say, but without also infusing this part of themselves or the thinking. So it's mechanical, or it's forced, or it's unfamiliar and uncomfortable for them. So it's, how can you take it, receive, really give it a good shot, and at the same time, like, really stay curious and experiment and see where your version of that is.
Yeah. I mean, it does take intelligence to make music really well. And I'm always hoping that when I explain a concept that relates to one passage, that my students will extrapolate that and do it in similar situations.
Yeah.
But I've certainly been disappointed in that hope.
Yes, me too. No, but it's what you were
Not
saying.
always, though.
Yes. Yes. I mean, it's so amazing, right? When the student comes back and they've tried what you said and they've implemented it and it really works, and you can see, it feels so good.
It's true. But sometimes they totally nail what you asked them for, and then it's like an almost identical phrase later in the piece where they just don't do it. And you're like, but sometimes you mention it to them, they're like, oh.
Yeah.
Then they understand.
Yeah. Or to what you were saying earlier, I remember this was maybe 8 years after I graduated from Eastman, or like 6 to 8 years, and I was practicing something, and in that moment I understood it. And it was something that Zvi had tried to teach me that at the time I totally thought I got it. But standing in my practice room 6, 8 years later, I was like, oh, I just got it. I think that's it. I think that's what he meant. And I actually email him and say, remember that thing? I just got it. And it was so funny because at that time he was well in his 80s. And, like 10 minutes later, I got a reply from him and he was very excited. He was like, keep learning. This is great.
That's awesome. Okay. Do you have any exciting things that coming up that you want to mention? Any amazing concert, or you've got a book, or I don't know what you're up to?
A book, not yet, but maybe one day. Who knows? I have a new podcast, not every week, but about 3 times a month. So that keeps me on my toes. It's always very exciting. And I have some group coaching programs that launch. I don't know when this is coming out, but I'm going to have a Black Friday sales on my practice program. And I think there's always some fun performances at Lyric that you can catch, or at the ballet. So life is busy.
All right, cool. And is there anything you want to ask me?
Oh, I was not prepared to interview. But I'd like to ask you the question that you asked me. What is the advice that you would give maybe young musicians? Or actually, I'll ask you the question I asked on my podcast, which is, what's an actionable tip you would give the listeners that they could implement in their musical life?
You know, think about music as a language, and what are you trying to say at all times? Who's saying it? Like, if you're playing a solo sonata, you don't want to be too timid because there's not a lot else happening, you know? If you're playing in an orchestra, you don't want to blast it out, but you still want to understand the language of whatever era of music you're playing. If you don't understand it, try to learn that language. Try to enjoy yourself. You know, that'll reward you and the people listening. If it's possible for you while you're playing to just make the sound that you want to hear so that you can enjoy listening, and then hopefully other people will enjoy that too. So then it's fun, at least it's fun for you.
Yeah, great. I love that.
You know, don't worry about making what somebody's idea of a correct violin sound, or that may not be that interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Listen to the sound that you're making that's coming out, and if you don't like it, figure out how to make it so that you will like it.
With positive self-talk also.
Yeah. No, I always think of, you know, if you watch like a football game and someone drops a pass, and they always talk about these people having a short memory. I think you need to have a short memory. Like, you missed a note. Like, nobody's dying. It's one note out of how many thousand, you know?
Right.
Like, there's work to be done, and someone has to do it, you know?
Yeah.
There's a lot of music that is required on this planet, and we need people to make it. So get to it, people.
That's a mic drop quote right there. It's too bad that this is on a stand. I would drop it right now.
All right. Well, thanks for listening. We're going to be right back and play something. Please subscribe to the show and give it lots of stars on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. And you can purchase my arrangements on bachfor2.com. And I'll have links to Renee's podcast in the show notes. And we'll be right back.
Yay.
Want to do another one?
Yeah.